That's great. Welcome, everyone. Perfect. Well, my name is Valencia Gaspard, and with me is Dr. Ray Bollman. And I'm very excited on behalf of both of us to talk about this topic because precarious employment is the topic of my research, my dissertation. It's a commitment that I've made for at least 4 years, and I'm about halfway done that 4-year commitment. So it's always exciting for me to be able to chat about this. And what I hope to do today is go through 3 sort of parts of the presentation. The first part will be a little bit about the project so that we're all situated in this 4-year adventure. And this part of the project, I should say, was planned to be delivered by Dr. Al Losan, who is my primary advisor, but he's unable to be here. So hopefully he's catching us on the webinar now. And the second part will be presented by Dr. Bollman. He'll go through a little bit of our findings, and I'll come back and talk about some qualitative stuff that we did for this project, which is still ongoing, I might add. So we'll jump into it so everybody's kind of on the same page and we start from the same point of departure. And I hope, because of the time that we have and the style of presentation that this will be, that it will be a two-way conversation, so please don't be shy. So to get started, this is our research team. We are a team of researchers who work through the University of Guelph but are associated with different organizations. So there is myself, Dr. Bollman, Dr. Miana Pleska, there is Ryan Gibson who's here, Al who I mentioned earlier, and Heather Mira who's here as well. And in the room with us is Carol Kenny, and she is our OMAFRA link. So everything that we do around precarious employment for this project is unique to Ontario, and some of the funding for the project comes from the Ontario Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs. And when I say precarious, the first question I always get, you can't seem to get away from it at these conferences, I'm sure you've heard it, is, well, what do you mean by that? You know, what is your definition? And we'll get into some of the indicators around precarious employment specifically, but I think it's important for folks in the room who maybe aren't engaged in this kind of work or research to do a little bit of conceptualization. And this is my conceptualization of precarious employment. So we start on the one side with, this is one of my favorite monuments in Washington, the FDR monument. We start on one end with unemployment. We understand the Great Depression. We know what it means to be unemployed. There's research around it. We know sort of some of the impacts of what that means. That's one end of the spectrum. And then on the other side, there's sort of the self-actualized, living the life you want, you know, gainfully employed, maybe looking forward to going to work, whatever that might look like. It's different for different people. And then we have something in the middle. And that big something in the middle is where this conversation sort of begins. It's that wide. Precarious employment doesn't only involve one certain industry, doesn't only involve one certain type of worker, but it's that big in between. So that's the very broad macro level conceptualization. And to get started, these are words that were used both by the literature and by some folks that I was chatting with in key informant interviews. These were words used to describe precarious employment. And you'll notice that when I talk about precarious employment, I'm not talking at this stage about rural precarious employment, because the fact is we don't know that much about it. Everything that's being written, being talked about, that was shared at the time of this project's commencement was urban focused, plain and simple. So you'll notice words like casual work, employed through temporary agencies, contingent work, the unbundling of work, all those kinds of words. That's where we're at. That's what's in that big question mark. And here are some more tangibles. Low income, low training, low employee supports available, high stress, high turnover, high uncertainty, you know, unknown duties at work, an unknown schedule. Those are some of the ideas that helped our research team craft indicators of precarious employment. And the indicators that we're looking at are these 4. Work in the context of our research is considered to be precarious based on these 4 indicators. Low wage, which is 1.5 times the minimum wage. Work that is contract work, includes term work. Part-time work, which is involuntary. That's something very important. Someone who's choosing to work a certain number of hours, you know, that kind of works for them, great. That's not necessarily considered precarious. Someone who is working part-time and wants to be working more hours. And someone who is self-employed, when that self-employment opportunity is unincorporated, no paid help. Those are the 4 indicators, and the presentation that Ray will give shortly involves the quantitative findings through those 4 indicators. And to place the conceptualization, some of the indicators in a larger project, I have for you the overview of our project. So 4 years, my PhD work, I'm at the University of Guelph. This is kind of the plan. It's been going pretty well, thankfully. It's been going according to plan. So at the beginning, we started with a quantitative review. And this came out, through Ray's work. It was a quantitative assessment. And at that stage, also, I was doing a lot of reading. So I was doing that literature review for our project, and that's where we discovered sort of right off the bat that what we knew, or what was being reported, was urban. Great. So then there was a qualitative review, and part 2 came out of key informant interviews that I did. And when Ray's done talking about the quantitative stuff, then we'll talk a little bit more with me about what we heard on the ground. And then next are the individual experiences. The individual interviews will be my doctoral dissertation, which is specific to this project. So that's coming up next, and then I'll write it up. So we're all situated, we're all ready and buckled up. I'm going to turn it over to Ray. And Ray is going to discuss a little bit more about what we know so far. But if I may, I know I talked about the literature review that had more to do with the urban side of things. I'd like to share with you what we know about that. Just kind of a little excitement. It's not the main focus of the research, but we do know something, so I'd like to tell you. We know that folks who work precariously have a lower level of health than the national average developed countries. We know that they're less healthy, less physically healthy, less mentally well. They experience more stress. We know that there's a connection to health and this style of work. The other thing that we know, and I will say that I'm from Leamington, and this is a little market in Leamington, which I love. You go to pick up tomatoes, but you stay for hours talking to your neighbors and know what's going on. People who work precariously have less time to do that. So they have less positive social experiences than everyone else. Primarily, again, this is the urban stuff, but primarily it has to do with time. Some folks who work precariously work multiple jobs, can't find the time between scheduling to do what they want to do. They're not able to get to where they need to go. That comes at the cost of the social bit. They're not in control of their own schedule. Oftentimes they're called into shift work late, quickly, with very little notice. All of that ties into the social well-being of folks. And also there is a negative economic association with precarious employment. And this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive because some folks will say, hey, hiring people precariously for me as an employer is a good decision. I have more people to draw from. I don't need to pay benefits because of the style of hiring. I can get rid of people easier. That's not really very true in the long run. It's not in that employer, that organization's best interest to hire people precariously. It ends up costing more. And we'll get into some more of that. And also we know so far from the combing of the literature that there are impacts, yes, on the individual, on the person working, sure, but also a spillover effect on their family, and then also spillover effect to the community, and the way that the person working precariously perceives themselves in their community relates directly back to their well-being. So there's a lot of connections around the impacts of this kind of work. And now we're going to very fittingly jump into Ray's work that talks more about this style of precarious employment in rural Ontario. So I'm going to cue up these slides. And my hope is right now, if you're sitting in the room, that you do have a lot of questions. I hope you have a lot of questions, and I hope we have a conversation about some of that soon. I'm going to have Ray do this.
So I got a blatant self-promotion here.
Yeah.
Here's a whole list of the fact sheets that Rural Ontario Institute publishes. And here's some excess fact sheets I accidentally printed off. There's 6 for each.
And if you're tuning in from the webinar, Ray just passed out some handouts here to folks in the room, which are fact sheets available online.
Thank you, Valencia. And thank you to Al Lozon and the team and to Valencia for the opportunity to participate in this project. As Valencia has introduced, she's done lots of nice work up front. And then after I finish, she's going to talk about what's really happening in the field. But this is what the secondary data is saying. I have an outline, which is what is precarious employment? And some context, the indicators that Valencia mentioned, some outcomes and a summary. So, and I've just handed out the fact sheets that I'm going to be drawing on. So this is the list of fact sheets published by the Rural Ontario Institute upon which I'm drawing for this presentation. So you can't see it, that's part of the thing that there's a lot of stuff there. So what is precarious employment? Well, from the dictionary, it is a feeling, right? I feel insecure. I feel uncertain. Everything's out of my control. And that's, I think, what Valencia's been talking about. And you read newspapers and they talk about precarious employment and interview somebody. That person say, I can't control my life. I don't have enough money. Valencia mentioned, I get called for work at the strangest times. So it's insecurity or precariousness. The context is, let me start with some definitions. Some of the charts will be metro, places of 100,000 and more, and the places that commute to there, versus non-metro, less than 100,000. And another set is census divisions, which are groupings of municipalities, where all of the municipalities are part of the metro. Census divisions where some are part of metro and some are part of non-metro, that's partially non-metro. And then some places that are purely non-metro. So just a different way of cutting the pie on metro versus non-metro. So the first background observation is the red bars are almost zero. That means the population change in non-metro areas has been about zero since 2006. Very little change in the total population in non-metro Ontario since 2006. Here is the trend of employment, 15 years and over in Ontario. And there's been a slight decline in non-metro employment since 2008. Here is the employment rate, percent that are working, percent of the population 15 and over that are working. And those are monthly observations that are just bouncing around. So month to month, there's a lot of seasonal variability. Bad luck and good luck. And certainly the blue lines bounce around more than the green lines. There's more bouncing around, more seasonality, more variability in employment in rural or non-metro areas. And sometimes the blue dots are as high as the green dots. So when times are good, in the peak season, the rural folks are working as hard and as often as much as the urban folks. But the number you usually see is a 12-month average. Lazy rural folks just out there working. Well, if we back up, in some months, there's as many folks in non-metro as a percentage term working as in metro. So this is a population 15 and over that are employed. But the core age workforce, say 25 to 54, equal share working in metro and non-metro. So the difference is the denominator here has more old folks in rural areas that should not be working, right? And so this is the usual published data, 15 years in age and over. So there are a few tricks in the data. And the other observation here is that, what's the best way to show this? Right here at minus 2%, 2 percentage points, the employment in non-metro areas went down by 58 to 52, or maybe 57 to 55, down by 2 percentage points. But within each age group, the share of the population that was working went up. So within each age group, in non-metro Ontario, more people were working, but a whole bunch shifted into older sectors and their employment rate was lower. So overall, the employment rate went down. Are we confused? Yeah. Yes, okay, move along, Ray. So the summary so far, and I got a moving summary here. Ontario non-metro population has not changed since 2006. Non-metro employment is down slightly since 2008. And non-metro employment rates in each age group are up in non-metro. So moving on to the statistical indicators. And the first thing we did was to take the students out of all of the data. So when we show you by age, those are non-student data we're looking at. And lots of students are in part-time work, low-wage work, and that sort of thing. And it seems to me, I'm not sure that's precarious because they're investing in education to get out of that situation. And I thought it was better too, and I think the team agreed, that let's take the students out and look at a non-student population. The first indicator we have is involuntary part-time work. And here, the black line, the blue line is the monthly data on involuntary part-time work. So from 2000 to 2007, it was about 7% of the number of employees, 7% of all employees were working involuntarily part-time. The black bar is the highest of the previous 12 months, and the red bar is the lowest of the previous 12 months, and that difference is about 1 percentage point, sometimes 2 percentage points. So, and then in the recession of 2008, 2009, involuntary part-time work went up from about 5% to about 7%, and has stayed constant, and then has fallen in the last year or two. Now this is showing you the differences between metro census divisions, which are black, red census divisions are partially non-metro, and the green are non-metro. So we're interested in the non-metro census divisions. You can see those green lines bouncing around fantastically. Month to month, a lot of variability in involuntary part-time work. And sometimes in green, they're just as low as the rest of the province. The involuntary part-time work in metro is just as low as the rest of the province, but on average it's higher. And the line through there is the line through there is a 36-month moving average. So on average, involuntary part-time work in non-metro census divisions fell from about 8% in 2000 down to about 7% in 2007, up to almost 9% in 2010, and falling gradually to 8% to date. So, next summary point. In non-metro, the incidence of involuntary part-time work has been flat since 2010, maybe down a bit in the last year. It is higher in non-metro than in metro, and higher in non-metro than partially non-metro. If you read those fact sheets, you'll see, perhaps not surprisingly, involuntary part-time work is higher among female employees, younger employees, and employees with lower levels of educational attainment. Next indicator, contract or term work. And you read this in the newspaper. I'm working on a contract, I got a 6-month contract, and I'll not know till the last day of the contract whether it's renewed or I have to start looking someplace else. That is insecurity and stress, as the indicators that Valencia was talking about. So here, the percent with, let's look at the blue line, the percent with, at the Ontario level, the percent with contract or term work went from, say, 5% in 2000 to 6.5% before the recession, fell to 5.5% during the recession. After the recession, it's back up to 6.5%, nearly 7%. So since 2010, the share of employees with a term or contract job is about 6.5%, 7%. Ontario as a whole. Here is this data by month, and again, the green is bouncing around. Some of it is low sample size, so you expect the sample to bounce around. I think a good share of this is real. This is really bouncing around in terms of just the variability or the precariousness of precarious employment. Perhaps that's the way to talk about it. And so the precarious employment here in terms of contract or term jobs is higher in the black, that's the metro, and the green and the red are overlapping. Let's look at the 36-month moving averages. So in the more recent periods, about 5.7, 5.8% of 5.8% of employees have term or contract jobs in both partially non-metro and non-metro census divisions. So it has increased from about 5% here in 2000 to over 6% right after the recession, and it's back a bit below 6% in the last 3 or 4 years. So next summary point on term or contract work. It has declined since 2013. It is lower in non-metro than in metro. This contract work is more higher incidence in metro. And from the fact sheet, term or contract work is slightly higher among females, among the younger employees, and interestingly, higher among employees with a university degree. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
We didn't predict that.
No,
Not a big difference, but a bit difference higher. Look at the fact sheet and figure out if you think it's significantly higher or not. So part of it is teachers get a term job, ends in June, and then do I get my term job back in the fall? So there's one, but there's a whole bunch of other types of term jobs out there. Low wage work. And as Valencia said here, low wages we've defined as less than 1.5 times the minimum wage. So every time the minimum wage changes, the incidence of low wage will change. So these red dots shows when the minimum wage changed. So the minimum wage did not change from 97 to 2003, and so the incidence of low wages came down just because wages are going up and the minimum wage didn't go up, so the calculation caused that to happen. And then lots of increases in the minimum wage here, so the incidence of the low wage work went up. But low wage work since 2010 has been flat. The incidence of low wage work is flat at the interior level, 26, 27, 28% since about 2010, 2011. Here is the pattern for each of the 3 types of census divisions. Non-metro has a slightly higher share of low wage work. All the green things bounce around, but that 36-month moving average shows that the incidence of low wage work in non-metro census divisions, the green line, hit about 30% and is still about 29% over the last maybe 4 or 5 years. So, summary at this point is low wage work has been flat in non-metro since 2010. Low wage work in non-metro is higher than in metro. From the fact sheet, perhaps not surprisingly, low wage is higher among females. The incidence is higher among females, higher among younger employees, and higher among employees with lower levels of educational attainment. Thing you would expect and you read in the newspaper, and the data show that. So being forced to hang out your shingle, I can't get a job, so let me try my hand at, I don't know, mowing lawn. I guess kids do that. Or set up a gardening enterprise, or a snow plowing enterprise, or a whole bunch of enterprises you set up, hang out your shingle. So that might be an indicator of precariousness because you're forced to do it. And we're looking at self-employment, and we're looking at unincorporated, and looking at no paid workers. So these are really small enterprises. So I saved you from all the bouncing around, right? We go straight to the 36-month moving average. So this type of self-employment is higher in non-metro, but that's largely or significantly due to farming, being lots of farmers who are self-employed with no paid help and they're unincorporated. But the point is, that's been flat. So it's gone down up to the recession, up a wee bit, and flat since 2010. So if it's an indicator of precarious employment, it hasn't changed in the last 6 or 7 years. So my summary therefore, non-metro incidence of self-employment, flat since 2010. It is higher than in metro, partly due to farming, and it is higher for males. maybe because of farmers. Then just an aside here, looking at non-farm self-employment. And here we see non-metro, purple, is lower than in metro in terms of the share of couple families with one member reporting non-farm, unincorporated self-employment income. So we got rid of the farmers, and now we find this, if this is a measure of entrepreneurship, it's lower, or if it's a measure of precarious employment, it's lower in non-metro than in metro. So the previous chart said non-metro was higher, the farmers are in. This is saying non-metro is lower, because the farmers are out, but there may be other factors there rather than just being a farmer. So this non-metro incidence and non-farm self-employment has not changed over the whole period of that data, 2006 to 2014, and the incidence is lower in non-metro than in metro. So in terms of outcomes, what do you call this, all this insecurity of my job, how does it show up in outcomes? Pick two ideas. One is presence of self-employment insurance benefits. Well, here, non-metro throughout the period, percent of couple families with one member reporting some employment insurance benefits once last year. So this annual data. Did somebody in your couple family, could be a kid or a grandparent, but somebody in the couple family, report some EI last year? Non-metro incidence is higher. Everything went up with recession 2009, and it has been declining since, partly because I think jobs came back, and partly because EI ran out. The point is, non-metro is higher. The point is, everything's coming down. And one reason for non-metro being higher is the seasonality of work in non-metro areas. So the conclusion here is that the incidence of EI has been declining since 2009 and is higher in non-metro. And the last one, maybe we look at the incidence of families reporting social assistance revenue. That might be an indicator that there's precarious employment out there that's showing up in the share of families reporting social assistance. And the shocking thing is to me, is that it's exactly the same in metro and non-metro, which I would not have predicted. And perhaps not surprisingly, it's going up over time. So maybe this is where we go to say, yes, we can now see maybe it's getting more precarious out there because a higher share of couple families, well, these are individuals, percent of tax filers reporting some social assistance income. If you go to the fact sheet, you'll see it's different between males and females in rural and urban are different. And I skipped that confusion because I was confused. And the point being that the incidence of social assistance is the same in metro and non-metro, and it has been continuously increasing a bit over time. So we've been doing the summary. And it seems to me overall, in recent years, there's been no increase in the incidence of our indicators of precarious employment, for the first ones, except an increase in the incidence of social assistance income. And this has caused great grief, as you might expect, among the rest of the team, because we got onto employment, we got onto precarious employment because the newspaper is saying it's breaking out all over. Well, maybe it is, and Valencia is going to be out in the field for doing her research. You'll find out what's really happening. But the trick is, either we have the wrong indicators, or it's not happening with these indicators, so maybe more research is required. But it was interesting that we picked these indicators and did not find an increase in precarious employment. And fortunately, we've got Valencia on the case to find out what's really happening.
Thanks for that, Ray.